Clan Eshin, the shadows of death. There are moments in one's life when the veil between the known and the unknown, the rational and the inexplicable, becomes so thin that it can be torn asunder with the slightest provocation. I had always prided myself on my scholarly mind, my devotion to reason and evidence. But since I began this accursed inquiry, that veil has frayed thread by thread, and I fear that I am on the verge of tearing it completely. The scratching had not ceased, nor had the mechanical hum that plagued my nights. If anything, it had grown louder, more insistent, as though the very walls of my home were conspiring against me. But worse than the noises, worse than the sense of being hunted, was the creeping knowledge that I was no longer alone. It began with a flicker in my peripheral vision there, in the corner of the room. A shadow too quick to catch, but too real to dismiss as imagination. Then, the movement became more pronounced, a darting figure, low to the ground, silent but swift. Each night it drew closer, until one evening I could no longer ignore the sensation that I was being watched, studied even, by something unseen lurking just beyond the edge of the candlelight. I should have fled. I should have burned my research, sealed myself away from this madness. But I couldn't. Not now. The Skaven had become an obsession, an all-consuming fire that burned through my every waking thought. And now I was about to confront the most insidious of them all, Clan Eshin, the silent assassins, the masters of shadow. In my previous studies, I had learned much of the Skaven's technological prowess and their vile devotion to disease. But Clan Eshin was different. They were a clan of predators, assassins trained in the arts of stealth and death, their methods honed in the distant land of Cathay. To Clan Eshin, death was not delivered in the heat of battle, but in the quiet moments between, in the flicker of a blade unseen, in the breath before a scream that never came. The records of Clan Eshin are scant, for their very existence relies upon secrecy. What I could find came in fragments, old reports from survivors, whispers of dark dealings in the courts of Skaven blight, tales of unseen killers who moved like smoke through the streets. There were no battles recorded against them, no heroic last stands, only sudden deaths, inexplicable disappearances, and rumors that the rats had learned to kill as men do. I had a source, however, one I had not yet dared to contact, a former agent of the Altdorf sewer watch, a man named Heinrich Bachmann. His reputation was that of a paranoid madman, dismissed from his duties after reporting the presence of rat men skulking through the city sewers. Few had believed him, and fewer still cared to follow up on his claims. But I knew that if anyone had come close to understanding the methods of Clan Eshin, it would be him. We met in a dingy tavern on the outskirts of Altdorf, a place where shadows lingered longer than they should, and the air was thick with the stench of stale ale and damp wood. Bachmann sat hunched in a corner, his back pressed firmly against the wall, his eyes darting to every movement, every sound. "They're watching me, he said before I could even sit. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. They've been watching me ever since I saw them. Those eyes, red, glowing in the dark, always watching." I tried to remain calm, to appear skeptical, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. He wasn't a man simply afraid of rats, he was a man who had seen death and knew it was waiting for him. "What did you see, Bachmann?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He hesitated, his hand trembling as he raised a tankard to his lips. "It was down in the sewers," he muttered, "late at night. I was with my patrol, but the others, they didn't notice. Too busy drinking and gambling, the lot of them. But I saw something, a shadow at first. Thought it was nothing, maybe a stray dog or some such. But then it moved quick, like it was. Hunting." His eyes darted toward the door, then back to me, as if expecting the very thing he was describing to leap out of the darkness at any moment. I followed it. He continued, his voice growing more strained. "It led me deeper, into parts of the sewers we never go. That's when I saw them, dozens of them. Silent, watching. They were like men, but smaller, hunched, covered in black robes. And their eyes, Their eyes glowed red, like embers in the dark. They didn't speak, didn't move. But I could feel it them, watching me, and in their hands. Knives. Black, curved knives. I could feel my pulse quicken as he spoke. Every word he said seemed to match the fragments I had uncovered in my research. Clan Eshin's assassins were silent, deadly, and above all, patient. They waited for the perfect moment to strike, and when they did, there was no escape. I ran, Bachman said, his voice breaking. I ran as fast as I could, but ever since that night, they've been watching. They know I saw them. They know I know. I leaned forward, keeping my voice low. What do they want, Bachman? What are they planning? His eyes widened, and for a moment I thought he might bolt from the table. But instead he leaned in closer, his breath ragged. They're everywhere, he whispered. They're not just in the sewers, they're in the cities, the towns, watching, waiting. They don't want anything. They want it all. Control, power. They'll kill anyone who gets in their way. He stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. I can't stay here. They'll know I spoke to you. I've said too much. Before I could ask anything more, he was gone, disappearing into the murky streets like a shadow himself. I sat there for a long time after he left, the flickering candlelight casting long, dark shadows across the tavern. My heart pounded in my chest as I replayed his words over and over again in my mind. Could it be true? Could Clan Eshin truly be everywhere, watching from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike? I returned to my study that night, my mind racing. I knew too much now, and I could feel it, the weight of eyes upon me. The sensation that I was being watched from every corner of the room. The shadows were no longer still, they moved with purpose, darting just beyond the edge of my vision. I lit every candle in my study, trying to banish the darkness, but it was no use. The feeling remained, a cold, creeping certainty that death was waiting for me in the shadows. My hand trembled as I reached for my quill, and the scratching in the walls grew louder, closer. There would be no rest for me tonight. The assassins of Clan Eshin were real, and now they knew my name. And soon, they would come for me.